Hello. If you are a fan of modern board games, there's a very good chance you've played something designed by Eric Lang. His already legendary design career has seen him work with Fantasy Flight Games, CMON, Hasbro Avalon Hill, and many more. In that time, he's created games that are themed around Warhammer, like Chaos in the Old World, Cthulhu, like Cthulhu Death May Die, and plenty of original titles as well, like Blood Rage, Ankh, Rising Sun, and many, many more. Plus, he's worked on A Song of Ice and Fire, the Game of Thrones miniature war game, and Marvel United, and countless other incredible gameplay experiences. In this interview, we talk about Lang's time working on the Warhammer and 40k licenses for FFG, what got him started in gaming in the first place, how he came to design so many different games and what his design philosophy is, as well as his most recent game with Avalon Hill, Life in Reterra, and how that is the culmination of a career's worth of experimentation and innovation. I'm Jordan, this is Jordan Sorcery, and today I'm in conversation with games designer Eric M. Lang. Eric, thanks so much for joining me to chat about your career in board games, some of your latest work, Life in Reterra. I thought we might start with just a little bit about how you got started with gaming. Where was your what was your origin story, I suppose?
Yeah, for sure. So, my origin story, I'm guessing some of your viewers know if they see me before, is it started like at 7, 8 years old. I used to play games with my grandmother in Germany in a little town called Neuss, which is very close to Essen, the where the big German game convention is.
Sure.
It's like a 30-minute train ride away. But it's a boring town, nothing to do. And we played a lot of really bad mass market German games, which I will not name, but we did not enjoy them. And I was like, I didn't enjoy the games as much, but I love spending time with my grandmother. So what I do is I would modify them, of course, adding like robots and dinosaurs, and stuff that 8-year-old boys like, and just to make them a little more fun. And then I kind of got the bug way back then. I was inventing sports to play at recess in school, and then while I thought I was actually on track to be a musician, I was still mostly playing games in the background. And then in like 98 or 97, no, I'm sorry, I'm very wrong here. In 90, in early 90s, very, very early 90s, or even maybe 89, I got D&D. Right. And D&D changed everything. That was the one where it's like, oh my God, I'm a hobby gamer now. I didn't know what that meant, but I knew it. Right. Changed my life. Like it basically, the life I've got today is pretty much can be tied to that initial game of D&D that we played like way, way back when. And then like it's a long series of complicated, like designing tons of games, going to lots of conventions, networking, hustling, until I finally got recognized by the folks at Fantasy Flight in like late 90s. Very late 90s, early 2000s.
Right. Amazing. Do you still play D&D and RPGs and stuff like that?
I wish I could say yes. I unfortunately burned out a little bit. And that the problem is it has nothing to do with the game. D&D is amazing. I played a ton of it, but do you remember back in like when the OGL, when the open gaming license for third edition hit,
Sure.
at Fantasy Flight, just like every other publisher, they were doing multitudes of games, right? And I worked on like 12 or 13 different OGL licenses for D&D, to the point where we were like, skimming the bottom of the barrel and like just converting everything to D&D third edition. I got so burned out that I think that part of me died a little bit. But I still like, I give me a good GM and a good afternoon, I will any day of the week. But I don't have, unfortunately, the bandwidth or I think even the temperament to put together D&D game of my own anymore.
Sure. Yeah, I imagine your relationship with just all games must be quite different, having spent so much time sort of under the hood, I guess, and looking at how they work.
I wish I could say, yeah, you're right. I wish I could say you're wrong, but yeah, you're all right. I still enjoy playing games a lot, but of course, yeah, like my hobby is my career, and I spend a lot of discipline trying to play games as a gamer and taking the designer hat off when I'm playing games for fun, but you can't take it all the way off.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm imagining there's got to be some times when you're playing games and you're seeing how things are working. Sometimes that's really cool. I'd love to do something like that or take some inspiration from it, versus sometimes you're thinking, how would I fix this?
Almost never the former, actually.
Right.
With if I see a game I like, the first thought I always have is like, oh my God, I don't have to make a game like this. This is great.
Right.
It's almost a sense of relief. Um, uh, and actually, almost never the latter either. Like I'm almost never inspired by games anymore.
Hmm.
Like of course, when I started, when I was tinkering with all the different games, yes, inspiration would come from actually playing games. But now I'm more inspired by like white space, right? What's missing on my shelf? What is not there that I would like to be there?
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's super interesting. So you're sort of drawing inspiration from the void and sort of saying, okay, what can I do to create something to fill this space?
Right. Yeah. Like what do I want on my shelf that's not there?
Yeah, amazing. I mean, you mentioned that you got started with Fantasy Flight and obviously worked on a lot of stuff there. Some of the games that really drew my attention were part of Fantasy Flight's relationship with Games Workshop. So
Yeah.
you were working on Chaos in the Old World in particular, which is just an incredible sort of area control game. I mean, do you recall what it was like working on and creating that game?
I do. I quite vividly actually. That game. I mean, it was a pure labor of love. I've always been, ironically, I've always been a big fan of the lore, especially of 40K, right? Because I was exactly the right age, right? Like, give me cool Space Marines or Sisters of Battle, like I love the aesthetic and I love the surface level, and I even sort of love the Game of Thrones like politics of it.
Yeah.
The game itself, the miniature game, I was never as much into, only because it's way too ADHD and too impatient for all that bookkeeping. But I love the background, so I've always wanted to make more games that were more self-contained games where all the rules were right on the surface. And yeah, Chaos in the Old World was very vivid. It was actually a pitch given to me by Chris Peterson of Fantasy Flight. We were talking about like what games we want to work on next, and he's like, and he actually had the idea. He had the idea. He named the game. I want to make a game about no. He said, "What do you think about a game called Chaos in the Old World, which is a game about the Warhammer gods?" I thought he was describing a game that already existed that I never heard of, and I was like, "Yeah, let's play that. That sounds awesome." And he's like, "Oh no, it's not made. We would like you to do it." I'm like, "Done, done, and done." That was the end of that meeting, and the next, I don't know if it was the next day, but it might have been 2 days later. I had a prototype.
Wow.
Because it was always sort of percolating because I loved the Chaos Gods, right? And I've always sort of in the background been thinking about it, and that's how I do a lot of game design, right? I do a lot of background percolating, and then sometimes sit down like, "Hey, brain, what you got?" And sometimes a whole game comes forth. And that was pretty much how Chaos in the Old World worked. Now, of course, it's a big game, it's a complicated game. The first prototype came very quickly, but it was like a year and a half of testing and iterating, but it didn't change fundamentally. Like the vision never changed.
Right.
Like I knew, but there were some significant milestone changes throughout.
Right.
But that game was it was lightning in a bottle. I knew it was. I knew I loved it. The very first prototype I remember I showed the Fantasy Flight folks, and they were like, "Oh my God, this is great." And that doesn't always happen. Like, right? Quite often, the first prototype is pretty shite, right? And but they were like, "This is already fun. Let's do lots of tweaks."
Amazing, yeah, yeah, because that asymmetric gameplay, you really feels like you've captured the spirit of the different gods and how they sort of might operate within this sort of themed game. I mean, was there a
Oh,
lot
absolutely.
of playing around with like how do we make this more Tzeentchian or sort of Nurgle or
Nope. That part. Because I knew the Chaos Gods already, right? So I
Hmm.
had I wasn't a deep scholar of the work, right? But I knew the vibe of each one. So and to me that's very important, especially when doing a licensed game. I don't want to do only deep cuts. I want to do something that's going to appeal to like all fans, especially casual fans who
Hmm.
kind of know what's going on, but there's enough research behind the game, like that, like to make sure that we hit all the not only the tropes, but I do that later. When doing the initial vision of the game, I want to make sure that no, the vibe is right. Like when you think Siege, this is Siege, right? Master manipulator. What do you think Slanesh is kind of? Well, you all know this, right? But no, I mean, I did lots of iterating, of course, like on individual cards, on even some of on the unit upgrades for sure. But no, the vibe didn't change much from the first iteration.
Great, yeah. And then there's also the supplement that brought in the horned rat as that fifth god.
Yeah, that one's funny. I actually did not want to do that expansion.
Right.
I considered at first. I was like, this game is complete. I like the game as it is. We talked about like, do we want to add an expansion? Like, what other gods are there? And like the lack of Skaven in the original game was kind of an affront to me personally because I love Skaven. But it's like I don't know if I want to do a whole expansion for that. It was actually FFG had to talk me into it.
Right.
And I had to take on a co-designer to really get it through the finish line. I'm glad we did it, but I was resistant at first.
Right. And I'm going to take it then there was no sort of other stuff that you might have explored beyond that had the sort of license continued.
There was, but it's on the cutting room floor. Like
Sure.
I of course I had lots of ideas. Even if a game comes together really, really fast at first, I consider it like my duty to go explore a bunch of other things, even if they're wrong, just to make sure, like test a bunch of other things. Even if the answers come back, no, your first idea was the best one, which often happens. I still feel like if somebody asks me, like an interviewer or a game designer or a player, like, did you consider this? I want the answer to be, yes, I did consider this, but I went with this instead.
Right. Sure. Yeah. And then on a sort of completely different note, it was still within the Warhammer world at Fantasy Flight. You worked on Warhammer Invasion as well, the living card game, right? Which
That's right, and Conquest.
yeah, and they must have been like very different from a design perspective, I imagine.
Not for me because my background's in collectible card games. So
Right.
so to me, like the challenge for Invasion, that was the first I remember. It was the first game we designed as a living card game rather than a collectible card game that got converted into a living card game. So there's a lot of experiments in there, including that draft format that was designed specifically to go with this format, which I think was a minor miss, but I love the game. And there was another game where I wanted to do a game about I wanted to do a collectible card game about Warhammer forever. And ironically, I'm not sure how well this is known, but at the time that Warhammer Invasion came out, it was actually based on the MMORPG that was out at the same time. That's why you had the two sides split, the Order and Chaos sides. That was a model presented by the MMO. And so we actually had I remember this in the very first version of that game, we had codes to get for account codes for the MMORPG. And I took a lot of lore from there. I love that game, by the way. I love the realm versus realm combat in that game. Sad it's gone, but it was kind of a double license.
Sure, yeah, that's great. Yeah, I sort of never put it together with Warhammer Online, but oddly enough, there is still a server out there, a private server where you can still go and play, just as it was many years ago.
Oh, don't tell me that! I don't have time to play another MMORPG. We'll forget I heard that.
Sure. So you then obviously sort of have continued to explore lots of different games. You worked with CMON and did a lot of really cool stuff there. One particular favorite of mine was Rising Sun, which feels like it shares a certain amount of DNA with Chaos in the Old World, but obviously explores it in a different way. I mean, do you see it as a sort of is there a relationship between those games for you?
I don't see it, but you're definitely not the first person who's told me that. Blood Rage is probably closer because it was the first of that trilogy, and Blood Rage actually borrows a mechanic directly from Chaos in the Old World. But like besides that one borrow, I actually don't like. I just love area control games, right? Like half of my career is just redesigning like Wolfgang Kramer's games, right? But I love like El Grande was a formative game for me, and I was like, oh my god, this but with more theme. So that's where I would trace Rising Sun probably closer to like what if El Grande met diplomacy, like if you want to do that sort of Hollywood pitch. But Chaos never really came in there. It was had I wanted to do the like with diplomacy very much in mind. I love the idea of diplomacy, but I hated playing it because of how high stakes and how friendship breaking it was. So the challenge was like, what kind of game would have betrayal and politicking and manipulation, but that didn't feel as bad. I was like, well, of course, like feudal Japan, like had that sort of gentlemanly diplomacy. It's like, well, I feel like our alliance has run its course. I'm going to use my unit of betrayal this turn, right? Like, and we're all fine with it. It's all kind of a little joke that's understood.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, I mean there's definitely some I see what you mean about the difference in the sort of stakes and diplomacy being quite friendship breaking. That's a good way
Yeah,
of
absolutely.
explaining it. But yeah, I mean Rising Sun, there can be some tense negotiation and sort of backstabbing in that game for sure as well, can't there?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I just wanted to take the sting out of it by making the sting by turning backstabbing into a currency. Like well, we got to do it. Sometimes you can be like, well, the game's forcing me to do it.
Hmm.
Everybody's like, all right, we're cool with that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean I've often wondered whether or not so like it sounds like the mechanics were kind of evolving there at the same time as the theme. Is that how you tend to work? You're sort of drawing together, okay, I want to explore this conceptual area. How does that like look and feel from a themic perspective? Or are you given more sort of clear, we need to make a game that looks like this or has this theme?
Oh, it's all over the place.
Right.
Like if I'm so Rising Sun, Blood Rage, Ankh, that trilogy was me. Like that was me going back to my roots. I grew up on folktales and legends. I actually grew up on a German book of folktales and legends given by my same grandmother I played games with. It was a messed up book. Like I don't even think it's in print anymore. Like it was
Right.
just it had this really weird like children's German take on all these folks and legends, and the ones I really gravitated to were Vikings and Camelot, although not even Camelot, like weird side stories. And I got really into Japan, and I got really into Egypt and Greece. And no, I'm not making a Greek game, but um, but yeah, these were games that were really personal to me, and I had what I realized was I had such a twisted interpretation of these mythologies that they're actually their own kind of IP.
Hmm.
And so when I brought that and then I worked with Adrian Smith, who actually knows the IPs, who knows has a scholarly knowledge of the IPs far greater than mine. So we kind of mixed like Adrian's truisms with my sort of interpretations, and that ended up blending a really, really cool IP. So all I cared about was the vibe, right? And to your question, like I always, um, the only consistent thing I start with is hook. What is the non-game design reason or the non-mechanical reason that you want to play this game in the first place? Often that's theme, but sometimes it's toy, sometimes it's gimmick, sometimes it's vibe, sometimes it's like a social contract, sometimes it's a piece of game theory, like but it's almost never like I never go like, oh, I want to make a worker placement game, right? Like with Godfather, I wasn't like, I want to make a worker placement game. What theme should I pick? It's like, no, I want to do a game based on one of my favorite movies. But hey, wait a minute, worker placement makes sense here. You're shaking down businesses. There's a thematic reason for it. That's cool. I'll do that.
Right. Yeah. And then there's sort of, I mean, you've sort of touched on it there and mentioned it before as well, but that kind of the gameplay, the game experience, the play feel, how much do you sort of have to work with that and sort of mold that over time through that? You know, you mentioned 18 months of development on Chaos in the Old World. Is a lot of that about making sure that it feels nice to play? I don't know if there's a better way of sort of phrasing that, but like the actual
Sure,
gameplay
sure.
experience.
No, if I'm understanding your question right, I don't think so. So the initial designs are always fast. If like the first draft of almost every game I do is really, really fast, or I get bored of it, or I put it away. Like if I don't have a really clear vision or it's kind of laborious, then I'm like, I'm probably not. I'm on the wrong path or something. Like there
Hmm.
should be a point where the game feels like it writes itself, where it's coming really, really and flowing really naturally. And if not, then I'm like, all right, I'm taking the wrong approach, and I'll put it away, do something else. What takes forever, of course, right, is not just is what I'm going to call game balance, but not like what you mean, like oh, every side has to have an equal chance of winning from from starting position through all parts of the game. Of course, that matters, right? But that's just brute force play testing. It's just to constantly test the game all the time. So this is this is the fun that the game is promising. Let's play it a bunch of different ways and make sure that the ways that you win are also the ways that are fun to play, or the ways that are promising the game. That there aren't traps in the game. That there aren't it's not off theme when you actually like get into it. That kind of thing.
Right.
So it's usually about testing for depth, and like plays 1 and 2 and 3. I've got pretty quick, right? Why is this fun? Why is this compelling? But it's plays 4 onward where you find the deeper development issues. And I want to make sure that when I'm developing that against the vision of the game, that when we make changes, it doesn't mess with the vibe or make it too complicated or overdeveloped, like oversolved.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I suppose one thing that's an interesting sort of area is, do you have in mind like the sort of play lifetime of a game as you're designing it? So are you thinking in terms of, okay, this game's going to be played 20 or 30 or 50 times? Or is it a certain, are you designing for like infinite replayability, or what's that kind of spectrum like?
Right. I mean, I'd love to say yes, because that sounds very deliberate and almost scientific, but I'm like, generally speaking, I want to make unless I have made games that I've designed to be disposable. Like I want them to be I want them to be done after X number of plays, right?
Hmm.
Because that affords a whole different kind of experience, right? A lot more high drama, high stakes. But generally speaking, like I want to make classics, right? I want to make enduring classics that you'll come to over and over and over again. And I'm not worried. I used to be worried about mastery, right? So this is a game that'll take you hundreds of games to master, right? Chaos in the Old World was definitely one of those. I'm a little bit more like, to me, I'm more worried about just enduring appeal. Like I don't mind if the mastery curve is a little flatter. Like I don't want every game isn't going to be Go,
Hmm.
right? And this has changed in the last 10 years or so. Like, I don't think every game has to be based on mastery. Sometimes you just want to play games to meditate, or sometimes you want to play games for discovery and exploration, which will lead you probably to Life in Reterra, which is a big one there, right? Um, like, I want to appeal, I want just something that is going to reward you for playing it again and again and again, for whatever reason the game promised you to.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. So you mentioned Life in Reterra there. That's something you've been working on with Avalon Hill recently. That's your most recent release. Could you tell us a little bit about the game? What's the Hollywood pitch, as you mentioned before? How would you
Yeah,
sell it?
sure. I'm going to give you my pitch, right?
Sure.
Hasbro has one pitch, which is like it's a good pitch, but my pitch, because for your audience, right, it is the most epic family game experience I think you're ever going to play. So like you'll see this on Target. It's gonna have a little, oh, it's up there. There it is. It has like, you look at that cover and it's like, oh, this is kind of cozy, has a almost like Stardew Valley, Animal Crossing type feel to it. It is theoretically post-apocalyptic, but it's not, right? It's still like nature has reclaimed the world. That's the story, right? Nature has reclaimed civilization. You are competitively rebuilding communities
Hmm.
to in a sustainable, fun way. And it's a light tile-based scoring system with 10,000 different variations of play, because there's 5 buildings with 5 different ways of scoring or powers that they give you in each game. And you switch one building and the game changes completely. And so there are 30 buildings in the game. So flipping, like, that gives you an obscene number of meaningfully different feels. And so what I wanted, like, this is not the most new thing for like the deepest hobby gamer, but it's a new thing for the rest of the world. So I wanted to make it so the goal here is like, if you've always been intimidated by hobby games, for games like Dominion or Magic the Gathering that have like that offer a lifestyle and a lifetime of play and discoverability, this game will do it because you can learn it in actually 2 minutes in plain English. No need to we designed this for people who have never played hobby games. Even though it has some DNA of hobby games, we made sure that that every time you are exposed to this game, every player that's exposed to this game will be their first exposure to tile laying, to strategic drafting, to point salad. right? We don't say any of that stuff in the game. It's just you score point. You take tiles from the middle, build a little square community. You score points for people, places, land, and stuff. So, things you can understand in English, things we borrow from video games, from mobile games, from classic folk games. So even though it is, I think it's a very deep, rich game. It's designed primarily for accessibility.
Right. Right. Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned video games actually, because looking at the game, it does seem like you've drawn some cool lessons from how that. I mean, even down to the infinite replayability that I was talking about before. It does seem to me that there is like a real ability to get deep into lots of different ways to explore and play that game. Relatively
Yeah,
simple and
exactly.
accessible, like you say, but you can get really deep with it from the looks of things.
I call infinite discoverability, right? So because I want to make sure not to say there's 10 different modes of play. That's intimidating and sort of and not really inviting. Like you don't have to relearn the rules of the game. You just flip a card over and go, oh, there's now the scoring matrix is different. I mean, the casual players aren't going to say that, but like
Sure.
they're going to say oh, this has a different feel, it has a different vibe to it. And then because the buildings are laid out at the beginning of the game, that's your strategy, right? Everything else is the randomness of the tiles and how they come out. But you've got a strategic outlook right there. So you immediately feel, oh, this is a strategy game. These are the scoring combos. And anybody can look at it and go like, oh, wait, this building kind of feeds this building. Or if I build these type of it gives me a feel for what kind of strategy I want to pursue. And then the game naturally goes, well, the tiles are randomly distributed. So you have to learn how to be opportunistic, watch what other players are doing, all that stuff that we sort of hobby gamers take for granted, but most gamers have not. It also does a few new things that I haven't seen in hobby games before, like very little subtle things, right? Like the way that buildings work. It's just if it fits, it sits. We put little gears on all of the tiles. And if you put multiple gears together, you can put a building of that shape on top of it. That's it. Those are all the rules. It's not mind blowing from a game designer point of view, but it's different. It's different from other tile laying games. So I feel like it deserves to sit on the shelf next to Carcassonne, next to King Domino, next to Kingdom Builder, but also for I would say 90% of the players who are going to play this will be their big strategy game that they play forever and ever and ever. And it's designed for infinite expandability because that's the kind of game I like to make. So there'll be lots of cool stuff coming up in the future, I'm pretty sure.
Well, that's cool. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's interesting because you're actually sort of building you're laying the tiles down to sort of build almost your territory at the same time as then building on that territory, aren't you, as you sort of go?
That's right.
I was curious about that actual choice to make it into a post-apocalyptic game because it's called Life in Reterra, right? Because you are
Mm-hmm.
the community rebuilding on this
Mm-hmm.
earth that's been reclaimed by nature, as you say. I mean, what was
Right.
that like? Did that inform the design of the game? Did that come later on? Where did the sort of theme lay in
So
it?
interesting answer here. So that actually came from Hasbro. So when Ken and so Ken Gruhl is my co-designer. This who's worked in mass market, and he's amazing he's really, really great at accessibility. Have you ever played Happy Salmon, which is one of his big games? It's
Right.
great. Um, so I'm the vision guy, right? I'm the crazy guy who looks at white space in the market and goes like, I want to make a game that's going to fit here, right? Or I love building architecture and toolboxes. And Ken's a machine. He can throw ideas a mile a minute. So we worked really well together. And so we wanted to, when we built this thing together, we're like, oh my God, yeah, this is a sandbox game experience that is just contained enough for mass. And I'm sorry, I forgot your question because I was going down memory lane here.
Sure, that's okay. So it was about the theme and how that played into the
Right.
design.
We had a theme that was similar, but not exactly the same.
Right.
So it was we knew, of course, it was tile building. So you want to build this little. I'm going to hold off on the original theme just because. But it was close, but not quite the same. And Hasbro came back and said well, we want to do a sort of a sustainability thing, and they were they had some insights way ahead of time before cozy became a cool thing. They're like we're noticing this kind of thing, and when they mentioned like Animal Crossing, I'm like, oh my god, yes, of course. So when they came back with and they came back with the title Life in well, they came back with the title Reterra, which we changed to Life in Reterra, um, just to make it more ownable. The I remember that that actually our original design was a little simpler. Was actually a little bit more. They didn't have buildings that give you powers. It was just scoring opportunities, right? So it was a little closer to classic Euro Gateway games. But when we saw like, oh, wait a minute, since you're actually building these buildings on a sustainable land, like, wait, we can make this more complicated, like more complex, because we can leverage all this cool intuition, right? When you build a building, you assume it's going to give you some kind of power. And as long as we tie the powers really closely to their theme, we get to add that extra level, that extra layer to it without necessarily like overburdening players. So yeah, there was a huge amount of collaboration there, and it really opened the game up. Like the original game we pitched them was very, very good. I loved it. It was simpler, was a little bit more self-contained. This is a lifestyle game. Like this is even more the ambition that I wanted.
Right, great.
I'm distracted by your adorable little cat there.
Yeah, I apologize. Yeah, Martha's
No,
decided
don't.
to get involved.
I always want to see your cat.
Well, I mean, I was going to ask just briefly what the so we talked a bit about the vibes and the sort of feel of games and themes and that sort of stuff. Do you imagine the sort of story that emerges from games, is that important to you from a design perspective? Because obviously you're working on the mechanics as well as everything else.
Absolutely. I've worked in video games for a long time. So in video games, I would be called a full stack designer, right? Which is like somebody who cares and is involved from conception to product, right? I think a lot about I'm like the physicality of it, the graphics, all that stuff's important to me. Even though I don't get final say, I have opinions on it. I make pretty prototypes. I do a lot of wireframe. I did a lot of work on UX. I love that stuff. To me, that's all game design. Um, and I'm sorry, I forgot your question again.
Well, it was just about the sort of how important the narrative that emerges from gameplay is in your design.
Right. Yes, I do believe it's important, but it maybe not in like not in the standard like AAA video game or like way where you are uncovering a story as told by the developers. I'm very much interested in player stories. So when a game is done, the way that I'm a lot of the way I design games is when a game is finished, I want the players to have a conversation about this kind of thing, right? And like very rarely do I want players to go, "Oh, that Eric Lang is a clever guy. He made this really clever game." Like I want them to forget about that immediately and start like, "Oh my God, this is the game where do you remember when I had I had the infirmary combo, that the infirmary and public square combo, where I like loaded up all my people in the hospital and then finally like that kind of thing." And I'm sorry, and now I'm stuck in something I wasn't allowed to say, or expansion stuff. There's some really cool narratives that are coming from newer stuff that are even a little bit more involved, but that's where a lot of that comes from.
Right.
I love designing games for players to entertain each other, and I do like that always comes out as narrative, and that's like emergent narrative from theme. But I care way more about that than like flavor text or like discover my great opus, right? Like I'm a writer too. I can write stuff, but I don't necessarily want to put that in the game medium.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I know you can't talk about too much, but is there anything you're able to say about where the game goes next?
I am not allowed. Just imagine. I mean, like you're a smart guy. You know how these games kind of work, right? I think your imagination serves you correctly.
Right. Good stuff. But the game is available now. It's been released. It's on shelves, or is it?
Sort of. It is available in Europe. This is the part you might have to edit because I might be wrong. But the game's available in Europe because it was launched in Europe, French and German first. It's available on Target.com, and I think it'll be available in the US. It'll be available at Target exclusively for a short time, and then more widely available. Like we're doing sort of a slow roll.
Right.
This is a new thing for Hasbro, right? Like Hasbro's very used to like wide release mass market stuff, and this is still a wide release mass market, but it has an audience and hobby. so we're navigating this kind of new space, right? Like how to release it with um in this sort of new world and rewrite some new rules. That's my perspective. I hereby do not speak for Hasbro in any way whatsoever. I'm just an independent game designer, but I'm pretty sure they would agree. That's kind of how it's going.
Right. Great. And is there
You'll be
anything
able
else?
to get it. Sorry.
Sorry. Go on, Eric.
You'll be able to get it with increasing regularity as the year progresses.
Right. Great stuff. Yeah. So it should hopefully be in everybody's Christmas stocking by Christmas time, something like that.
Oh yeah, I would be surprised if not.
Great. And is there anything? It sounds like you're always working on something. So is there anything you can talk about that you are working on for the future outside of the Life in Reterra stuff?
Sure. Well, on my video, I've got other family games. I have a game with Phil Walker Harding called Wrath of Fire Mountain, which is an area control game for a mass market that has never heard of area control games before. With cave people and dinosaur buddies on a tectonically unstable land, 30 to 45 minutes of gameplay. I love this game. I play it all the time. It's got Yahtzee at its core, so it's delightful. It works the way you think it does, but it's really fresh. Like, it actually has a couple cool new twists that you haven't seen in hobby games. I Heart Manatees, which is probably the most personal mass market game I've ever designed. It is a game about how much I love manatees. Now, for your audience, I'm not sure if you guys even know what manatees are. They're these like big, adorable, derpy sea cows that live in shallow ocean water. Right. They're adorable. Like, I call them sea pandas. I grew up swimming with them in Florida, and so and my family's from a conservation background, and so I just wanted to make a game. I actually made this game to teach my nieces about how important manatee conservation is, but not by being like boring and judgy educational, just by making a game that's fun, right? So it's a fun, like, build a little habitat, rescue these adorable little manatee meeples, and keep them happy. Also, like 30 to 45 minutes, you play it with all entirely intuitively. 2-minute teach. I tell you a little story about manatee conservation. Now you know the rules. This is very much my headspace right now.
That sounds
I'm
great.
designing games by my inner 13-year-old for your inner 13-year-old.
Amazing. Well, I look forward to that one because that sounds really fun. Well, Eric, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. It's been great to talk to you about your career and about some of the cool games you've been working on recently.
Me too, Jordan. Thanks for having me on.
Amazing. Thank you. I am very grateful to Eric for finding the time to chat to me about his career and some of the games that I absolutely love. It was terrific fun. If you would like to find out more information about Eric's latest game, Life in Reterra, I've included a link in the description below. It is currently available for pre-order in some territories and will be rolling out around the world soon. If you would like to support the work that I do here on the channel, please consider checking out my Patreon via the link in the description below. It's the only way I'm able to keep doing this. You will get access to exclusive early content, there are updates, there are giveaways every month, and access to my exclusive Discord as well. I really appreciate anything you can do to support the channel, and whether that is sharing and liking here on YouTube or joining my Patreon, it is greatly appreciated. And if you would like to listen to my interviews, then you can do so by searching for In Conversation with Jordan Sorcery wherever you get your podcasts. And please let me know down in the comments who you would like to see me interview in the future. I'm keen to hear from you about which members of tabletop history and design and Games Workshop history you would love to hear me speaking with in the future. Thank you once again to Eric. Thank you for listening and watching. I'm Jordan, and this is Jordan Sorcery.